My name is Rachel Martinez, and at 32 years old, I never imagined that walking into my own surprise birthday party would be the moment I finally understood just how invisible I had always been in my own family. That humid Saturday evening in Phoenix, Arizona, when I opened the door to what I thought was my celebration, only to see a chocolate cake decorated with "Congratulations, sis" in bright pink frosting. Everything clicked into place with devastating clarity. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Growing up in the sprawling suburbs of Scottsdale, I was the middle child in what appeared to be a picture-perfect family. My parents, Margaret and Robert Martinez, owned a successful chain of auto repair shops across the Phoenix metropolitan area. From the outside, we had everything: a large house with a pool, luxury cars in the driveway, annual vacations to expensive resorts. But inside those perfectly manicured walls, there was an unspoken hierarchy that I never quite understood as a child. My older sister Vanessa, 35, had always been the golden child. 3 years my senior, she possessed an effortless confidence that drew people to her like moths to a flame. With her striking features and natural charisma, Vanessa excelled at everything she touched. High school valedictorian, prom queen, full scholarship to Arizona State University, where she studied business management. Every achievement was celebrated with elaborate dinners, professional photo sessions, and endless praise from our parents. Then there was my younger brother Jordan, 28, who, despite being the baby of the family, commanded attention through his athletic prowess. A star quarterback in high school, he earned a partial football scholarship to University of Arizona. Even when his college career ended due to a knee injury, our parents continued to treat him like a conquering hero. His attempts at various business ventures, most of which failed within months, were funded without question and praised as entrepreneurial spirit. I fell somewhere in between, academically solid but not brilliant, socially comfortable but not magnetic, athletically adequate but not exceptional. I graduated with a respectable 3.6 GPA, earned a degree in graphic design from a state school, and built a quiet but successful career creating marketing materials for small businesses. I was reliable, hardworking, and unassuming, qualities that seemed to render me invisible in a family that celebrated only the extraordinary. The pattern established itself early and never wavered. Vanessa's piano recitals were family events where my grandparents, aunts, and uncles gathered to applaud her performances. Jordan's football games drew the entire extended family, complete with custom jerseys bearing his name. My art exhibitions at local galleries were attended by my parents with the same enthusiasm one might show for a routine dental cleaning, present but disengaged, checking their phones, leaving early for more pressing commitments. I learned to expect less, to celebrate my own achievements quietly, to find validation from teachers, friends, and eventually colleagues, rather than from the people who should have mattered most. When I won a regional design competition during my junior year of college, I called home excited to share the news. My mother's response was a distracted, "That's nice, honey," before immediately shifting the conversation to Vanessa's latest promotion at the marketing firm where she worked. The Christmas when I was 25 stands out in my memory with particular clarity. I had saved for months to buy my parents a professionally framed collage featuring highlights from their 30-year marriage, wedding photos, vacation pictures, images of all their children and grandchildren arranged in an artistic timeline. I spent weeks perfecting the design, selecting the perfect frame, coordinating with a high-end printing service. When they opened it Christmas morning, my father glanced at it briefly and said, "Very thoughtful, Rachel," before setting it aside to focus on the expensive watch Vanessa had given him. That same Christmas, Jordan presented them with a hastily purchased gift card to a restaurant, and my parents spent 10 minutes discussing how considerate he was to think of their need for more date nights. The collage ended up in their guest bedroom, hanging crooked on a wall where no one would see it except the occasional overnight visitor. Work became my refuge. At Morrison Creative Agency, a mid-sized firm specializing in small business marketing, I found the recognition and appreciation that eluded me at home. My designs were featured in industry publications, my clients sent thank you notes praising my creativity and attention to detail, and my boss, Jennifer Chen, regularly acknowledged my contributions during team meetings. I advanced steadily from junior designer to senior graphic artist to creative director, earning a comfortable salary that allowed me to purchase a modest but charming townhouse in Tempe. My romantic life followed a similar pattern of quiet success without fanfare. I dated occasionally, had a few serious relationships that ended amicably when it became clear we weren't quite right for each other. At 29, I met David Patterson, a gentle soul who worked as a physical therapist at a local rehabilitation center. David appreciated my thoughtful nature, my artistic eye, and my tendency to notice details others missed. We moved in together after a year of dating, creating a peaceful home filled with my artwork, his extensive book collection, and the kind of comfortable routine that suited both our personalities. David proposed on a quiet Tuesday evening in our living room, presenting me with a vintage ring he had found at an estate sale because he knew I preferred unique pieces to traditional diamonds. The proposal wasn't elaborate or Instagram-worthy, but it was perfectly us, intimate, thoughtful, and genuine. We planned a small wedding for the following fall, imagining a celebration that reflected our values rather than trying to impress anyone else. When I called my parents to share the engagement news, my mother's first question was whether we had set a date yet, followed immediately by concern about potential conflicts with Vanessa's work schedule. No congratulations, no expressions of happiness for my future, just logistical considerations centered around my sister's convenience. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes before my mother remembered she needed to call Vanessa about something unrelated. The wedding planning process revealed the depth of my family's disinterest in ways I hadn't anticipated. While David's parents, divorced but amicable, both offered to help with various aspects of the celebration, my parents remained curiously detached. They agreed to attend, of course, and offered a modest financial contribution, but showed no interest in the details that excited me. The vintage-inspired decorations, the local band we had hired, the custom menu featuring dishes from our favorite restaurants. 2 months before our wedding, Vanessa announced that she and her boyfriend Marcus were thinking about getting engaged soon. The news dominated every family conversation for weeks. My parents immediately began discussing potential venues, guest lists, and budget considerations for what would undoubtedly be an elaborate affair. The contrast between their enthusiastic involvement in Vanessa's hypothetical wedding and their polite indifference to my actual upcoming marriage was so stark it was almost comedic. Our wedding day arrived on a perfect October afternoon, crisp air and golden sunlight filtering through the trees at the small outdoor venue we had chosen. David's family and our friends created a warm, joyful atmosphere, celebrating our union with genuine happiness. My parents attended, dressed appropriately and behaving cordially, but they seemed like polite strangers fulfilling an obligation rather than people celebrating their daughter's most important day. The photographer captured a family photo that told the entire story in a single frame. David and I stood in the center, radiant with happiness, surrounded by his parents who were beaming with joy. My parents stood slightly apart, their smiles pleasant but reserved, as if they were guests at an acquaintance's wedding rather than parents of the bride. Vanessa and Jordan flanked them, both checking their phones even as the camera clicked. After the honeymoon, David and I settled into married life with the same quiet contentment that had characterized our relationship from the beginning. We hosted dinner parties for our friends, took weekend trips to explore Arizona's natural beauty, and slowly began discussing the possibility of starting a family.
David integrated seamlessly into my chosen circle of colleagues and friends, people who appreciated my quirky sense of humor and creative perspective. My relationship with my biological family remained cordial but distant. We exchanged holiday cards, attended obligatory family gatherings, and maintained the surface level pleasantries that allowed everyone to pretend we were a close knit unit. I had long since stopped expecting more, accepting that some families simply operated on different emotional frequencies. The annual Martinez family birthday celebrations had always followed a predictable pattern. Vanessa's birthday in March was typically marked by elaborate dinner parties at expensive restaurants with carefully curated guest lists and professional photography to document the occasion. Jordan's birthday in August meant backyard barbecues with extended family, sports on television, and casual but abundant festivities that stretched late into the evening.
My birthday in November had traditionally been acknowledged with smaller gatherings: dinner at a mid-range restaurant with immediate family, a store-bought cake, gifts that suggested minimal thought or effort. I had learned not to expect surprise parties or elaborate celebrations, accepting these modest acknowledgments as appropriate for my place in the family hierarchy. Which is why, when my mother called 3 weeks before my 32nd birthday with unusual excitement in her voice, I was both surprised and cautiously optimistic. She mentioned that they were planning something special this year, that it was time to really celebrate me properly, that I should keep the evening of November 15th completely free. For the first time in years, I felt a flutter of anticipation, wondering if my family had finally recognized that I deserved the same level of celebration they routinely provided for my siblings. The days leading up to November 15th carried an unusual energy. My mother called twice during the week, asking seemingly casual questions about my schedule, whether David would be attending, and reminding me to dress nicely because they had invited some special people to celebrate with us. The uncharacteristic attention felt foreign, but welcome, like finally being seen after years of existing in the background. David noticed my elevated mood and teased me gently about my newfound optimism regarding my family. "Maybe they're finally ready to appreciate what an amazing woman I married," he said, kissing my forehead as we prepared for bed the night before the party. I allowed myself to hope that perhaps maturity and perspective had shifted something in my family's dynamics, that 32 years old was the magic number when I would finally matter as much as my siblings. Saturday afternoon arrived gray and drizzly, typical November weather in Phoenix, that matched neither my hopeful mood nor the festive occasion I was anticipating. I spent longer than usual getting ready, selecting a deep burgundy dress that David always complimented, styling my hair with extra care, and even applying makeup with more precision than my usual routine. If my family was finally ready to celebrate me properly, I wanted to look worthy of their attention. David drove us to my parents' house, his hand resting comfortably on my knee as we navigated the familiar streets of Scottsdale. The neighborhood looked exactly as it always had: manicured lawns, identical Mediterranean-style houses, luxury vehicles in every driveway. But tonight felt different, charged with possibility and the promise of recognition I had craved for decades. As we pulled into the circular driveway, I noticed more cars than usual. Vanessa's silver BMW sat beside Jordan's lifted truck, but there were also vehicles I didn't immediately recognize. My pulse quickened with excitement. My parents had actually invited other people to celebrate my birthday, something they had never done before. Perhaps extended family members, maybe some of their friends who had watched me grow up but rarely acknowledged my existence beyond polite holiday greetings. A lot of love and effort went into making this story come to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off.
The front door was unlocked, as it always was during family gatherings. David and I stepped into the marble-tiled foyer, immediately hearing voices and laughter coming from the direction of the living room. The sounds were louder and more animated than typical family dinners, confirming that this was indeed a larger celebration than I had experienced in years. "Ready to be surprised?" David whispered, squeezing my hand as we walked down the hallway lined with family photos that chronicled Vanessa and Jordan's achievements while featuring me only in group shots where my presence was unavoidable. The living room came into view gradually as we rounded the corner. Balloons in gold and silver created an elegant backdrop against the cream-colored walls. A happy birthday banner stretched across the fireplace mantel, its letters glittering under the chandelier light. The dining room table, visible through the archway, was set with my mother's good china and crystal glasses, suggesting this was indeed a special occasion worthy of the family's finest possessions. But it was the cake that stopped me in my tracks, sitting prominently on the kitchen island where everyone could see it. A beautiful 3-layer chocolate creation with pristine white frosting, decorated with elaborate pink roses and golden accents. Professional quality, clearly ordered from an expensive bakery rather than purchased from a grocery store like my previous birthday cakes. The kind of cake that said someone had invested real time, money, and thought into this celebration. Except the message piped in elegant pink script across the top didn't read "Happy Birthday, Rachel," or even a simple "Happy 32nd Birthday." Instead, in flowing cursive letters that caught the light, it proclaimed, "Congratulations, sis." I blinked, certain I was misreading the inscription. The noise from the living room continued, voices I was beginning to recognize as extended family members and family friends, people who had attended Vanessa's elaborate celebrations but had never been invited to mine. But their presence made sense now, because this wasn't my birthday party at all. "Congratulations, sis!" The words on the cake remained unchanged no matter how many times I read them. The decorations, the guest list, the expensive cake, the good china, none of it was for me. It was for Vanessa, celebrating some achievement or milestone that had apparently warranted the kind of party I had foolishly believed was finally being thrown in my honor. David's hand tightened on mine as he processed what we were seeing. His sharp intake of breath confirmed that I wasn't imagining things, that we had indeed walked into what we thought was my surprise birthday party, only to discover it was actually a congratulations party for my sister. The irony was so complete it was almost artistic. On my birthday, using the celebration I had been promised, my family had chosen to honor Vanessa instead. "Rachel, David, perfect timing!" My mother's voice carried from the living room, bright and cheerful and completely oblivious to the devastating realization we were experiencing in her kitchen. Come in, we're just about to make the announcement." The announcement. Of course there was an announcement. Vanessa's achievements always warranted formal announcements, speeches, toasts, and elaborate acknowledgments of her superiority. My legs felt unsteady as we walked toward the living room, David's presence beside me the only thing keeping me upright, as the full scope of the situation became clear. The living room was packed with people I recognized from previous family celebrations, my aunts and uncles, my grandparents, family friends who had attended every major milestone in Vanessa and Jordan's lives. They were all dressed nicely, holding glasses of champagne, their faces animated with excitement for whatever news was about to be shared, the same enthusiasm that had never been directed toward any of my accomplishments. Vanessa stood near the fireplace, radiant in a stunning emerald green dress that perfectly complemented her dark hair and olive complexion. Marcus stood beside her, his arm around her waist, both of them glowing with the kind of happiness that comes from being the center of positive attention. Jordan lounged in one of the leather armchairs, his usual casual confidence on full display, as he basked in his role as the beloved son, witnessing his beloved sister's moment of triumph.
My father stood with a champagne flute raised, clearly preparing to deliver a toast. The scene was picture perfect, worthy of the society pages, exactly the kind of elegant family celebration that had never been organized for any event in my life. And it was happening on my birthday, in the time slot my mother had specifically asked me to keep free for my own party. "Ah, there's our birthday girl," my father announced, gesturing toward me with his champagne glass.
The phrase should have been warm and welcoming, but it carried an odd undertone, as if my birthday was an afterthought worthy of mention only because it happened to coincide with more important news. "We were just about to share Vanessa's exciting announcement," my mother added, her eyes bright with pride and excitement. "Perfect timing, Rachel. You'll want to hear this." Perfect timing. Because what could be more perfect than learning about Vanessa's latest triumph at what was supposed to be my own celebration? I managed to nod, my throat too tight to speak, as David's hand found mine again. His touch was anchor and lifeline, the only thing preventing me from turning around and walking straight back out the door. Vanessa stepped forward, her smile brilliant and confident. "I wanted to share this with all the people who matter most to me," she began, her voice carrying easily across the room. "Marcus and I have been talking about our future, and we're excited to announce that we're engaged." The room exploded in congratulations, applause, and excited exclamations. My aunts rushed forward to examine Vanessa's ring, a massive diamond solitaire that caught the light from every angle. My mother was crying happy tears. My father was shaking Marcus's hand vigorously, and Jordan was already joking about bachelor party plans. Engaged! Vanessa was engaged, and my parents had decided to celebrate this announcement by throwing an elaborate party on my birthday, in place of the celebration they had promised me. The betrayal was so complete, so perfectly emblematic of my place in this family, that it almost felt scripted. Like someone had designed the most effective way possible to remind me that I would always be secondary, always be the afterthought, always be the child whose special day could be co-opted for someone else's more important news. "This calls for a toast," my father declared, raising his glass higher, "to Vanessa and Marcus, and to the beautiful future ahead of them." Everyone raised their glasses, their faces turned toward the happy couple, their attention focused entirely on the golden child who had once again claimed center stage. I stood frozen in the doorway, David beside me, both of us holding empty hands, while everyone else celebrated with champagne we hadn't been offered. The toast concluded with more applause and congratulations. Vanessa graciously accepted hugs and well wishes from the assembled family and friends, her natural charisma drawing people to her like she was holding court. Marcus beamed beside her, clearly thrilled to be joining a family that knew how to celebrate achievements properly. And in the middle of it all, I remained invisible, the birthday girl at a party that wasn't for her. Watching my family lavish on my sister the kind of attention and celebration they had promised me, but had instead redirected towards someone who already received more than enough recognition. The cake, with its "congratulations, sis" message, sat waiting in the kitchen, a tangible symbol of how little I mattered in the hierarchy of this family. My birthday had become the backdrop for Vanessa's engagement party, my special day absorbed into her moment of triumph like it had never existed at all. The immediate aftermath of Vanessa's engagement announcement felt like being underwater. Sounds became muffled, movements seemed to happen in slow motion, and I struggled to breathe normally as the reality of the situation crystallized around me. Everyone was still celebrating, still offering congratulations, still focused entirely on the happy couple, while I stood there like a ghost at my own birthday party. David's grip on my hand had become almost painful, but I welcomed the physical anchor as my emotional world tilted sideways. He leaned close to my ear and whispered, "Do you want to leave?" The question was simple, but loaded with implications. Leaving would mean acknowledging that this wasn't my party, that my family had essentially canceled my birthday to celebrate Vanessa instead. Staying meant enduring whatever came next, pretending to be happy while my heart broke in real time.
Before I could answer, my mother appeared at my elbow, her face flushed with excitement and champagne. "Isn't this wonderful, Rachel? Your sister is engaged! Can you believe it?" She grabbed my arm, her enthusiasm so genuine it was almost insulting. There was no acknowledgement of the awkwardness. No recognition that she had essentially lied to me about tonight's purpose. No awareness that I might be experiencing anything other than pure joy for Vanessa's good fortune. It's quite a surprise, I managed, my voice sounding strange and distant even to my own ears. Especially on my birthday. My mother's smile flickered for just a moment, a brief shadow crossing her features before she recovered with practiced ease. Oh, honey, we can celebrate your birthday anytime. But an engagement? This is a once-in-a-lifetime moment. Vanessa wanted to share it with the whole family, and when else would we get everyone together like this? The casual dismissal of my birthday as something that could happen anytime, while treating Vanessa's engagement as sacred and unmovable, felt like a physical blow. 32 years of birthdays that could apparently be rescheduled, postponed, or simply absorbed into more important family events. I stared at my mother, searching her face for any sign that she understood what she had just said, any indication that she recognized the cruelty of her words. Besides, she continued, already turning her attention back toward the celebration, you're married now. Birthdays aren't as important when you're a grown-up with your own life. But Vanessa's starting a new chapter. This is so exciting for the whole family. The logic was so warped, it was almost fascinating. Because I was married, my birthday was somehow less significant, but Vanessa's engagement to her boyfriend of 2 years was worthy of commandeering my celebration. The double standard was so blatant, it would have been funny if it weren't devastating. David's hand found the small of my back, offering silent support, as my mother drifted away to rejoin the festivities. I watched her go, noting how naturally she moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations as if she were the mother of a bride, basking in reflected glory from Vanessa's achievement. The pride on her face was unmistakable. The same expression I had seen countless times throughout my childhood whenever Vanessa accomplished something noteworthy. Rachel! My Aunt Linda appeared beside me, champagne glass in hand and eyes bright with excitement. Can you believe your sister is getting married? That ring is absolutely gorgeous. Marcus must have spent a fortune. When's the wedding? I hope it's somewhere fabulous. You know how Vanessa has such exquisite taste. The questions came rapid fire, each one a reminder that even extended family members automatically assumed I would be thrilled to discuss Vanessa's engagement at length. There was no acknowledgement that today was my birthday, no recognition that I might have other things on my mind besides my sister's romantic milestones. I don't know the details yet, I replied carefully. They just announced it. Well, I'm sure it will be spectacular. Your parents must be over the moon. Their first daughter is getting married. Though I suppose you were first technically, but you know what I mean. Vanessa's wedding is going to be the event of the year. She moved away before I could process the casual cruelty of her comment. Their first daughter getting married? As if my own wedding 2 years ago was so insignificant it didn't count? As if Vanessa's upcoming nuptials would somehow be the family's real introduction to the concept of daughter marriages? The erasure was so complete, it was breathtaking. David appeared next, his usual easy grin stretched across his face. Pretty crazy, right? Vanessa getting engaged on your birthday? What are the odds? He laughed as if the timing were coincidental rather than deliberately chosen, as if my parents had simply forgotten to check the calendar before planning their daughter's engagement party. Did you know about this? I asked directly, studying his face for signs of discomfort or awareness. Jordan shrugged, taking a swig from his beer bottle. Vanessa mentioned she might have some news soon, but I didn't know when. Mom and Dad called yesterday saying they were throwing a family party tonight. I just figured it was your birthday thing and maybe some other announcement, too.
The casual admission that he had known this was Vanessa's party, rather than mine, hit like a fresh wave of betrayal. My own brother had come to what he knew was my sister's celebration, on my birthday, without questioning the arrangement or considering how I might feel about it. The thoughtlessness was so complete, it suggested he had never considered my feelings at all. You didn't think it was weird that my birthday party was also Vanessa's engagement party? I pressed, needing to understand how my family had rationalized this decision. I mean, it's efficient, Jordan said with the kind of pragmatic logic that made perfect sense if you had never been the overlooked child. 2 celebrations for the price of 1. Plus, you're not really a big party person anyway, right? This way, Vanessa gets her announcement moment and you still get family time on your birthday. Win-win. Win-win. The phrase echoed in my mind as Jordan wandered away to refill his beer. In his worldview, I had somehow won by having my birthday celebration replaced with my sister's engagement party. The reasoning required such a fundamental misunderstanding of my worth and needs that it was almost impressive in its completeness. I found myself gravitating toward the kitchen, seeking a quiet moment away from the celebration that had nothing to do with me. The congratulations, sis cake sat exactly where I had first seen it, a 3-layer monument to my family's priorities. I stared at the perfect pink roses, the elegant script, the professional craftsmanship that represented more care and expense than had ever been invested in any of my birthday cakes. David joined me in the kitchen, his expression a mixture of anger and protectiveness that I found oddly comforting. At least someone in this house understood that something fundamentally wrong was happening. "This is insane," he said quietly, his voice tight with controlled fury. "They invited you to your own birthday party and then made it about Vanessa instead." "Welcome to my family," I replied, surprising myself with the bitter laugh that escaped. "This is actually pretty typical. I just usually don't get my hopes up like I did tonight." "Typical?" David's voice rose slightly before he caught himself, mindful of the celebration happening in the next room. "Rachel, this isn't typical. This is cruel. They promised you a birthday celebration and then used that promise to trick you into attending Vanessa's engagement party instead." The word trick hung in the air between us, and I realized he was right. My parents had deliberately misled me about tonight's purpose, knowing I wouldn't have been as enthusiastic about attending my sister's engagement party on my birthday. They had used my hope for recognition as bait to ensure my attendance at Vanessa's celebration. "Maybe we should go," I said quietly, finally voicing what I had been thinking since the moment I saw that cake. Before David could respond, Vanessa herself appeared in the kitchen doorway. Still glowing with happiness and champagne, her diamond ring caught the light as she reached for a bottle of water from the refrigerator, and I found myself staring at it despite my best intentions. It was indeed massive, exactly the kind of statement piece that would generate compliments in conversation for years to come. "Rachel, I'm so glad you're here," Vanessa said, her voice warm with what seemed like genuine affection. "I know this is your birthday, but when Marcus surprised me with the proposal last night, I just had to share it with everyone immediately. You understand, right? Sometimes you just can't wait for the perfect moment." The explanation was delivered with such casual certainty that I almost admired its audacity. Vanessa had been proposed to the night before my birthday, had chosen to announce it at my party, and was now asking for my understanding as if she were the one making a sacrifice. The self-centeredness was so complete it achieved a kind of artistry. "Of course," I heard myself saying, the polite response so automatic it bypassed my conscious mind entirely.
Congratulations. I'm happy for you.
Vanessa beamed, clearly relieved by my gracious response. "I knew you'd understand. You're such a good sister. And honestly, birthdays happen every year, but hopefully I'll only get engaged once." She laughed at her own joke, missing entirely the implication that my annual birthday was somehow less important than her one-time engagement. "Hopefully," I agreed, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. "Plus, this way, your birthday will always be extra special because it's also my engagement anniversary. We'll always have that connection now. Isn't that sweet?" Vanessa's smile was brilliant and utterly sincere, as if she had given me a gift rather than stolen my celebration. The reframing of my birthday as a footnote to her engagement was the final piece of the puzzle, The last confirmation that my family's emotional landscape was so skewed that they genuinely believed this arrangement was beneficial for me. In Vanessa's mind, she had elevated my birthday by associating it with her more important milestone, never considering that she had actually erased it entirely. Something crystallized inside me as Vanessa walked away, her diamond ring catching the kitchen light one final time before she rejoined her admirers in the living room. The casual way she had reframed the theft of my birthday as a gift, the complete absence of awareness that she had done anything wrong, the expectation that I would be grateful for being connected to her more important milestone, it all coalesced into a moment of devastating clarity. I had spent 32 years accepting less than I deserved, 32 years of swallowing disappointment, making excuses for my family's behavior, and convincing myself that their treatment was somehow normal or acceptable. But standing in that kitchen, staring at a cake that celebrated my sister's achievement on my birthday, I finally understood that this wasn't about love expressed differently or family dynamics that were merely quirky. This was about fundamental disrespect, and it had been happening my entire life. David stood beside me, his jaw clenched with barely contained anger. "We're leaving," he said quietly, but with such conviction that I knew he meant it. "Right now, before you have to endure another second of this." For a moment, I was tempted to agree. The easy path stretched before me. We could slip out quietly, avoid confrontation, maintain the surface peace that had characterized my relationship with my family for decades. I could go home, cry privately, and then move forward with the same resigned acceptance that had gotten me through countless previous disappointments. But something was different this time. Maybe it was the sheer audacity of using my birthday party as cover for Vanessa's announcement. Maybe it was my mother's casual dismissal of my celebration as something that could happen anytime. Maybe it was the accumulation of 32 years of being treated as secondary, finally reaching a breaking point. Whatever it was, I felt a surge of anger that was foreign and powerful and absolutely justified. "No," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "Not this time." David's eyes widened slightly, but he nodded with immediate understanding. "What do you want to do?" Before I could answer, my father appeared in the kitchen doorway, champagne glass in hand, and face flushed with celebration. "There you are. We're about to cut the cake. Vanessa wants a picture with the whole family around it." He gestured toward the "congratulations, sis" cake with the kind of casual expectation that had defined my relationship with my family, the assumption that I had planned, regardless of how it affected me. "Actually, Dad, I need to talk to you and Mom. Privately." Something in my tone must have registered because his jovial expression faltered slightly. "Right now? We're in the middle of the celebration. Can't it wait until later?" "No, it can't wait," I replied, maintaining eye contact in a way that felt both foreign and empowering. "This conversation is 32 years overdue." My father glanced uncertainly between me and the living room, where the sounds of celebration continued unabated. "Rachel, honey, whatever's bothering you, maybe we should discuss it after the party. This is Vanessa's special night."
Exactly, I said, the single word carrying more weight than any speech. "This is Vanessa's special night, on my birthday, using the party you promised me. That's precisely what we need to discuss." The directness of my statement seemed to catch him off guard. My father was used to my diplomatic approach to family conflicts, my tendency to soften criticism with qualifiers and apologies. The absence of those familiar cushions made my words hit with unexpected force. "I'll get your mother," he said finally, his discomfort evident as he set down his champagne glass and headed toward the living room. David moved closer, his presence a source of strength as I prepared for what I knew would be the most difficult conversation of my life. "I'm proud of you," he whispered, and those 4 words gave me more confidence than decades of seeking my parents' approval ever had. My parents returned together, my mother's face showing confusion mixed with mild annoyance at being pulled away from the festivities. "Rachel, sweetheart, what's wrong? You look upset. Are you feeling okay?" The concern in her voice might have been touching if it weren't so perfectly illustrative of her blindness to the situation. She could see that I was upset, but couldn't connect it to the fact that my birthday celebration had been stolen and repurposed for my sister's engagement announcement. "I want to understand something," I began, working to keep my voice level and controlled. "3 weeks ago, you called me and asked me to keep tonight free because you were planning something special for my birthday. You specifically said it was time to really celebrate me properly. Do you remember that conversation?" My mother nodded slowly, her expression growing wary. "Yes, of course. And we are celebrating you. The whole family is here." "The whole family is here to celebrate Vanessa's engagement," I corrected, "on my birthday, using the party you promised would be for me." "Well, yes, but 2 celebrations in one evening is more efficient," my father interjected, echoing Jordan's earlier reasoning. "You're all together anyway, and—" "Stop," I said firmly, holding up my hand. "Just stop. Do you hear yourselves? You're talking about my birthday like it's a scheduling inconvenience that needed to be bundled with something more important." My parents exchanged glances, the kind of look that passes between people who are realizing a conversation isn't going the way they expected. My mother recovered first, her voice taking on the soothing tone she had used to manage my childhood disappointments. "Rachel, honey, you're overreacting. We're not saying your birthday isn't important, but Vanessa just got engaged. This is huge news. Surely you can understand why we wanted to share it with the family right away." "I understand that perfectly. What I don't understand is why that required lying to me about tonight's purpose. Why not just invite me to Vanessa's engagement party instead of pretending it was my birthday celebration?" The question hung in the air, and I watched my parents struggle to formulate an answer that wouldn't reveal the uncomfortable truth that they had known I might not attend with enthusiasm if they had been honest about the evening's real purpose. "We didn't lie," my mother finally said, but her voice lacked conviction. "We said we were planning something special, and we are. Vanessa's engagement is special for the whole family. For the whole family except me, apparently, because I'm the only one who wasn't told what tonight was actually about. Everyone else knew this was Vanessa's party. I was the only one who thought it was mine."
"That's not—" my father started, then stopped, apparently realizing that denying it would be pointless. "Let me ask you something else," I continued, feeling momentum building. "In 32 years, have you ever thrown me a surprise party? Have you ever invited extended family to celebrate my birthday? Have you ever ordered a professional cake for my celebration?" The silence that followed was answer enough, but I pressed on. "Because you did all of those things tonight, for Vanessa, using the birthday party you promised me." My mother's face was beginning to show cracks in her composed facade. "Rachel, we love you just as much as we love Vanessa and Jordan. We've always—" "No," I interrupted, my voice rising slightly. "Don't say you've always treated us equally. That's not true, and we all know it. But tonight isn't about the past 32 years of favoritism. Tonight is about the fact that you promised me something and then gave it to someone else without even telling me." "We thought you'd be happy for your sister," my father said, his tone growing defensive. "Family is supposed to support each other during big moments." "I am happy for Vanessa, but I'm devastated that supporting her apparently required stealing my birthday celebration. There were 364 other days you could have chosen for her engagement party. She wanted to announce it right away. When you're excited about something, you want to share it immediately. Then why not plan her party for tomorrow or next weekend? Why did it have to be tonight, on my birthday, using the celebration you promised me?"
The question exposed the flaw in their logic, and I could see them scrambling for justification. The truth was that my birthday had simply been convenient, a pre-planned gathering that could be repurposed without additional effort or expense. My feelings hadn't been considered because they rarely were. Maybe we should have handled this differently, my mother conceded finally, but even her admission was qualified and reluctant. Maybe? I repeated, incredulous. Mom, you invited me to my own birthday party and then surprised me with someone else's celebration instead. You put "Congratulations, sis" on the cake. There's no maybe about whether this was wrong. My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. What do you want us to do about it now, Rachel? The party is already happening. People are here. We can't exactly send everyone home and start over. The practical question revealed everything about their priorities. Not, how can we make this right, or what can we do to repair the hurt we've caused, but how can we minimize disruption to the event we actually care about? I want you to acknowledge what you did. I want you to admit that you lied to me, that you stole my birthday celebration, and that you never considered how that might affect me. We didn't steal anything, my mother said, her defensive tone returning. You're still here, the family is still together, and we can celebrate your birthday too. How? How exactly are we celebrating my birthday? There's no mention of it anywhere in this house. The cake says, "Congratulations, sis." The toasts are for Vanessa and Marcus. The gifts are engagement presents. The photos being taken are the happy couple. Where exactly is my birthday being celebrated? The specificity of my questions seemed to finally penetrate their denial. I watched recognition dawn on their faces as they realized how completely my birthday had been erased from an event that was supposed to honor it. We could sing happy birthday, my mother offered weakly. After 32 years of disappointments, you think singing happy birthday as an afterthought to your daughter's engagement party is sufficient? I asked, my voice carrying decades of accumulated hurt. For the first time in my life, I saw my parents truly uncomfortable with their treatment of me. The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of unspoken truths and years of unaddressed resentment.
The confrontation ended not with resolution, but with my parents' visible discomfort and my own exhaustion from finally speaking truths that had been buried for decades. My mother mumbled something about discussing it later. My father suggested we should all calm down and enjoy the rest of the evening, and I realized that even faced with direct evidence of their behavior, they were incapable of genuine accountability. We're leaving, I announced, the words feeling both liberating and terrifying. David and I are going home. Rachel, please don't leave angry, my mother pleaded, her voice taking on the panicked edge that appeared whenever family harmony was threatened. This is supposed to be a happy evening. Don't let a misunderstanding ruin it. A misunderstanding. Even after our conversation, she was still minimizing what had happened, still refusing to acknowledge the deliberate nature of their deception. The word choice told me everything I needed to know about their capacity for change. It's not a misunderstanding when you lie to someone about the purpose of an event, I replied, pulling my purse strap over my shoulder. It's manipulation, and I'm done pretending that's acceptable. David moved to my side immediately, his presence a steady reminder that I wasn't alone in this assessment of reality. Together, we walked through the living room, where Vanessa's celebration continued unabated. Guests were taking photos with a happy couple, examining the ring under different lighting, and making animated plans for wedding festivities. No one noticed our departure, except Jordan, who looked up from his conversation with a confused expression. You guys are leaving already? We haven't even cut the cake yet. The cake with "Congratulations, sis" written across it in pink frosting. The cake that symbolized everything wrong with my family's priorities. I didn't trust myself to respond civilly, so I simply waved and continued toward the door. The drive home passed in silence, both David and I processing what had just occurred. The Phoenix streets were quieter than usual for a Saturday night.
streetlights casting long shadows across the suburban landscape that had shaped my childhood but never truly felt like home. When we pulled into our driveway, the modest townhouse looked like a sanctuary compared to the emotional minefield we had just escaped. Inside, David poured himself a generous glass of wine and offered me the same. I accepted gratefully, sinking into our comfortable couch, surrounded by the artwork and books that reflected our actual values rather than the performative wealth my parents displayed. The contrast was stark. Our home felt peaceful and authentic, while my parents' house had always felt like a stage set designed to impress rather than nurture. "How are you feeling?" David asked gently, settling beside me on the couch. "Honestly, I don't know," I admitted, taking a sip of wine and trying to process the evening's events. Part of me feels vindicated that I finally said what needed to be said, but part of me feels like I just burned down every bridge I had with my family. "Were those bridges worth preserving?" David asked, his question gentle but pointed. The inquiry forced me to examine what I would actually be losing if my family chose to cut contact over my refusal to accept their behavior. Regular disappointments disguised as family gatherings. Conversations where my achievements were overlooked and my siblings were celebrated. Holidays where I felt like a guest rather than a family member. The more I considered it, the more I realized that what I was afraid of losing had never actually existed. My phone buzzed with a text message from Vanessa. "Sorry you left early. Hope everything is okay. Thank you for being there for my big announcement. Love you."
The message was so perfectly emblematic of her self-absorption that I showed it to David, who read it with increasing incredulity. Even after witnessing our parents' obvious discomfort during our conversation, Vanessa remained completely oblivious to the fact that anything was wrong. In her mind, I had attended her engagement party and left early for unrelated reasons. The possibility that I might be upset about the circumstances hadn't even occurred to her. I typed and deleted several responses before finally settling on a simple, "Congratulations, I wish you both happiness." It was truthful without being warm, acknowledgement without celebration. The days following the birthday that wasn't brought an unexpected sense of relief mixed with profound sadness. Relief because I had finally stopped pretending that my family's treatment was acceptable, but sadness because confronting the truth meant acknowledging how little I had actually mattered to them all these years. The grief was real and sharp, mourning not just the family I had lost, but the family I had never really had. My mother called twice during the week, both conversations following the same pattern. She would ask if I was feeling better, suggest that we had all overreacted, and propose getting together soon to, quote, "put this behind us." When I explained that I wasn't interested in moving past the incident without addressing the underlying issues, she would grow frustrated and eventually end the call with a disappointed sigh. David proved to be an invaluable partner during this period, listening without trying to fix, validating my feelings without pushing me toward premature forgiveness. His own family, while far from perfect, had always operated from a baseline of mutual respect that made my parents' behavior seem even more egregious by comparison. He had been shocked by what he witnessed at the party, but not entirely surprised. 3 years of marriage had given him plenty of opportunities to observe the family dynamics I had normalized. Work became a refuge, much as it had throughout my adult life. My colleagues at Morrison Creative Agency noticed my subdued mood but respected my privacy, offering support through small gestures like bringing me coffee or taking on extra tasks without being asked. The creative projects that filled my days provided a welcome distraction from the family drama, allowing me to focus on problems that could actually be solved through skill and effort. Jennifer Chen, my boss, eventually asked if everything was all right during one of our weekly check-ins. I found myself sharing more than I had intended, describing the birthday party incident and its aftermath. Jennifer listened with the kind of focused attention that had made her such an effective leader, asking thoughtful questions and offering insights without judgment. "Family relationships are complicated," she said finally, "but what you're describing sounds less like complication, more like neglect. You have every right to expect basic respect from the people who claim to love you." Her validation meant more than I had expected.
Jennifer had met my parents briefly at a company holiday party years earlier, and her professional eye had apparently picked up on dynamics that I had been too close to see clearly. The outside perspective helped me trust my own assessment of the situation. 3 weeks after the party, Jordan called unexpectedly. His voice carried an unusual uncertainty as he asked if we could meet for coffee. I agreed, curious about what had prompted the unusual request for one-on-one time. We met at a cafe near my office, Jordan looking uncharacteristically serious as he ordered his usual black coffee and chocolate croissant. "I've been thinking about what happened at the party," he began, stirring his coffee unnecessarily, "about what you said to Mom and Dad." I waited, unsure whether he was planning to defend our parents or share his own perspective on the family dynamics. "I never really thought about it from your side before," he continued, his admission surprising in its honesty. "I mean, I knew Vanessa got more attention growing up, but I figured that was just because she was the oldest and I was the baby. I didn't really consider how that affected you." The acknowledgement was more than I had received from anyone else in my family, and I felt a cautious hope that perhaps one relationship could be salvaged from the wreckage. "It's not just about getting less attention," I explained carefully. "It's about being consistently treated as if my feelings and experiences matter less than everyone else's. The birthday party was just the most obvious example."
Jordan nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "Yeah, I can see that now. And honestly, the more I've thought about it, the more messed up it seems that they used your birthday party for Vanessa's announcement. Like, there were literally 364 other days they could have chosen." His echo of my own argument suggested he had been genuinely processing the situation, rather than simply looking for ways to smooth things over. The recognition felt like a small victory, proof that my perspective wasn't as unreasonable as my parents had suggested. "Have you talked to them about it?" I asked. "A little," Jordan admitted. "Mom keeps saying you're being dramatic and that family should support each other through big moments. But when I asked her how she would have felt if her birthday party had been turned into someone else's celebration, she got quiet and changed the subject." The image of my mother being confronted with a hypothetical version of her own experience was both satisfying and sad. It confirmed that she understood the problem intellectually, but was unwilling to apply that understanding to her treatment of me. "What about Vanessa?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Jordan's expression darkened slightly. "She thinks you're jealous of her engagement and using the birthday thing as an excuse to cause drama. She said you've always been sensitive about not being the center of attention." The assessment was so perfectly reversed, accusing me of wanting to be the center of attention because I objected to having my celebration stolen, that it was almost impressive in its psychological projection. Vanessa, who had never not been the center of attention, apparently couldn't imagine legitimate objections to her behavior that weren't rooted in envy. "Are you planning to keep talking to them?" Jordan asked, his question carrying genuine concern rather than judgment. "I honestly don't know," I replied, surprising myself with the admission. "I'm not interested in pretending this didn't happen or going back to the way things were, but I'm also not sure they're capable of the kind of change that would make a relationship with them healthy." Jordan nodded thoughtfully. "I get that. And for what it's worth, I think you handled the whole thing better than I would have. I probably would have just left without saying anything and been angry about it forever." His support, unexpected and genuine, felt like a lifeline. Perhaps my family couldn't be salvaged as a whole, but maybe individual relationships could be rebuilt on a foundation of mutual respect rather than inherited obligation. 6 months after the birthday party incident, I was sitting in my office reviewing portfolio submissions for Morrison Creative Agency's annual scholarship program when I realized something profound had shifted inside me. The young artists whose work spread across my desk reminded me of myself at their age. Talented but uncertain, seeking validation, hoping someone would recognize their potential. But instead of seeing my younger self as someone who had been overlooked, I now saw her as someone who had been building strength in silence, developing skills that would eventually allow her to create her own opportunities for recognition.
The scholarship program itself had been my initiative, proposed to Jennifer 6 weeks after the confrontation with my parents. I had suggested that our agency establish a fund to support emerging graphic designers from underrepresented backgrounds, providing not just financial assistance, but also mentorship and internship opportunities. The proposal had been approved enthusiastically, with the company matching employee contributions to create a substantial endowment. Reviewing applications had become one of my favorite responsibilities, each portfolio telling a story of creativity persevering despite limited resources or family support. Many applicants wrote essays about feeling invisible or undervalued, their experiences resonating with my own journey in ways that were both heartbreaking and inspiring. The scholarship allowed me to be the advocate I had needed as a young person, the voice saying, "Your work matters," to artists who might otherwise go unnoticed.
David had watched my transformation with a mixture of pride and amazement. The woman who had once apologized for taking up space was now confidently presenting ideas in board meetings, advocating for junior employees, and building programs that created opportunities for others. The anger that had emerged during that kitchen confrontation had evolved into purposeful action, channeling decades of accumulated frustration into positive change. "You're different," he had observed one evening as we worked side by side in our home office, he on architectural blueprints and I on scholarship materials. "More present, like you finally believe you deserve to be here." He was right. The constant internal dialogue questioning my worth had quieted considerably, replaced by a clearer understanding of my value based on my actions and contributions, rather than my family's recognition. Work relationships deepened as I became more willing to share ideas and take credit for successes. Friendships strengthened as I stopped automatically deferring to others' preferences and began expressing my own opinions and desires. The most significant change, however, was in my relationship with celebration itself. For my 33rd birthday in November, David and I had planned a weekend trip to Sedona, just the two of us, hiking among the red rocks and staying at a small boutique hotel. But a week before we were scheduled to leave, I realized I wanted something different. "What if we invited people?" I had suggested to David, the idea forming as I spoke. Not a huge party, but maybe 8 or 10 friends, people who actually know me and want to celebrate me specifically. The concept of actively seeking celebration, rather than hoping it would be offered, felt revolutionary. David had embraced the idea immediately, helping me plan a dinner party at our favorite local restaurant. We invited colleagues from work, neighbors who had become genuine friends, and David's sister Sarah, who had always treated me with the warmth my own siblings had never shown. The evening had been everything my family gatherings had never been, focused entirely on me, filled with people who knew my quirks and achievements, abundant with the kind of specific affection that comes from being truly seen. My friend Lisa from work had brought a cake decorated with designs from my portfolio. Sarah had commissioned a custom illustration celebrating my creative journey. Each gift and gesture reflected genuine knowledge of who I was, rather than generic tokens of obligatory family love. The contrast with previous birthdays was stark enough to be almost funny. Here were people who remembered my favorite flavors, who asked about projects I had mentioned months earlier, who celebrated my personality rather than tolerating it. The realization that I had been accepting crumbs for decades when a feast of authentic appreciation was available felt both liberating and somewhat melancholy. My family had not been invited to the celebration, a decision that had required considerable courage but felt increasingly natural as the date approached. Jordan had called to ask about birthday plans, and I had been honest about hosting a small gathering for close friends. His understanding response suggested that our relationship was continuing to evolve in healthier directions. "That sounds perfect for you," he had said, without any of the guilt-inducing language that might have characterized such conversations in the past. "Have an amazing time."
Vanessa's wedding planning had become an all-consuming family obsession during the spring and summer months. My mother called regularly with updates about venue visits, dress shopping expeditions, and catering tastings, seemingly expecting me to share her enthusiasm for events I wasn't involved in planning for a celebration I was expected to attend as an honored guest, despite being treated as an afterthought. The wedding invitation had arrived with formal elegance, my name spelled correctly, but my relationship to the bride described simply as sister, rather than the more personal titles given to bridesmaids and special family members. The implication was clear. I was invited because family protocol demanded it, not because my presence was particularly desired. David and I had discussed whether to attend, weighing family obligation against self-respect. The conversation revealed how much my perspective had shifted over the previous months. Instead of automatically assuming I should attend regardless of how I was treated, I found myself questioning whether participating in celebrations where I felt unwelcome was actually beneficial for anyone involved.
What would you want to do if family expectations weren't a factor? David had asked, helping me cut through the guilt and obligation to identify my authentic feelings. The answer had been surprisingly clear. I had no desire to spend an entire day watching my family lavish attention on Vanessa while treating me as a peripheral figure. The realization that I could choose not to attend felt both shocking and obvious, like discovering a door that had always been unlocked but that I had never thought to open. We had ultimately decided to attend the ceremony but skip the reception, a compromise that honored my relationship with Vanessa while protecting my own emotional well-being. The decision had been communicated to my parents with polite but firm language that brooked no negotiation. Their disappointment was evident, but seemed less important than my own peace of mind. The ceremony itself had been as elaborate and beautiful as expected, held at a luxury resort with every detail perfectly orchestrated. Vanessa looked stunning, Marcus appeared genuinely happy, and the assembled guests provided an appropriately impressed audience for the spectacle. I had watched from my assigned seat in the third row, behind Marcus's family and my parents' closest friends, the physical positioning reflecting my emotional distance from the celebration. During the family photo session, I had been included in group shots, but excluded from the smaller, more intimate arrangements featuring just immediate family. The photographer's directions made the hierarchy clear. Parents and siblings here, grandparents and spouses there, extended family in the back. I found myself classified as extended family despite being one of only 2 siblings, the designation both painful and clarifying. But instead of the familiar sting of exclusion, I felt something closer to relief. The distance that had once felt like rejection now seemed like protection, a buffer between my authentic self and the performance of family harmony that exhausted rather than nourished me. I was present for the milestone without sacrificing my dignity or pretending to feel more included than I actually was. After the ceremony, David and I had left as planned, driving home through the Arizona desert as the sun set behind the mountains. The silence in the car was peaceful rather than heavy, both of us processing the experience without needing to immediately analyze or justify our decisions. "How do you feel?" David had asked as we pulled into our driveway. "Lighter," I had answered, surprising myself with the accuracy of the word. Like I finally stopped trying to force myself into a space that was never meant for me. The months following the wedding had brought an unexpected gift, genuine peace regarding my family relationships. The desperate need for their approval had faded, replaced by a clearer understanding of my worth independent of their recognition. Phone calls with my parents became shorter and less frequent. Our conversations focused on surface-level topics that didn't require emotional investment from either side. Jordan continued to reach out regularly,
our relationship slowly rebuilding on a foundation of mutual respect rather than shared childhood trauma. He had begun questioning other family dynamics as well, noticing patterns of favoritism and manipulation that had previously been invisible to him. The conversations were sometimes difficult but always honest, marked by his genuine effort to understand perspectives he had never been forced to consider. The scholarship program had grown beyond my initial expectations, attracting applications from talented artists across the Southwest. Reading their essays and reviewing their portfolios had become a source of profound satisfaction, each award announcement feeling like a small victory against the forces that tried to convince creative people they didn't matter. The first recipient, a young woman whose essay about feeling invisible in her family had brought me to tears, had sent a handwritten note describing how the recognition had changed her belief in her own potential. Building something positive from the pain of my family experience felt like a form of alchemy, transforming years of hurt into opportunities for other people to be seen and valued. The work had connected me with other advocates and artists who understood the importance of creating space for overlooked voices, expanding my professional network and personal sense of purpose in ways that felt both meaningful and sustainable.
Standing in the gleaming conference room of the Phoenix Art Museum 3 years after that life-changing November evening, I watched as the final slide of my presentation faded from the projector screen. The room erupted in sustained applause from an audience of art collectors, gallery owners, and community leaders who had gathered for the annual Creative Voices Gala, an event that had grown from a simple scholarship program into a movement, reshaping how Arizona's art community identifies and nurtures emerging talent. The woman presenting tonight bore little resemblance to the person who had walked into her own birthday party, only to discover it belonged to someone else. That woman had apologized for her existence, measured her worth by others' recognition, and believed that family obligation meant accepting whatever scraps of attention were offered. This woman commanded rooms, created opportunities for others, and understood that respect is earned through action, not inherited through blood. Before we begin the auction tonight, I announced, my voice carrying clearly across the elegant space, I want to share something personal that shaped everything you've seen this program accomplish. The room quieted, 300 faces turning toward me with the focused attention I had never received in my childhood home, but had learned to command through competence and conviction. The story I was about to tell had become the foundation of my speaking engagements across the country, but tonight felt especially significant. This was Phoenix, my hometown, where the people who had known me before my transformation could witness who I had become. 3 years ago, I thought I was walking into my surprise birthday party. Instead, I discovered that my family had used the celebration they promised me to announce my sister's engagement. The cake read, "Congratulations, sis," and I realized I had spent 32 years being invisible in my own life. The audience listened with the kind of rapt attention that comes when someone shares a universal experience of feeling overlooked or undervalued. I could see recognition in faces throughout the room. Successful professionals who remembered their own moments of devastating clarity about family dynamics. Artists who had fought for recognition. Business leaders who had learned to advocate for themselves after years of being dismissed. That night, I made a choice that changed everything. I stopped accepting less than I deserved and started creating the recognition I wished I had received. The Creative Voices program exists because I know what it feels like to be unseen, and I refuse to let that happen to others. The auction that followed raised over $400,000 for expanded programming, but more importantly, it connected artists with collectors who had never considered emerging talent worth their attention. Watching young painters and graphic designers network with gallery owners who might transform their careers felt like witnessing magic, the same kind of life-changing recognition I had created for myself through sheer determination and refusal to remain invisible.
After the event, as David and I drove home through the desert landscape that had shaped my childhood, I reflected on how completely my relationship with the city had changed. Phoenix was no longer the place where I had been overlooked and dismissed, but the launching pad for work that was gaining national recognition. The scholarship recipients I mentored were displaying their art in galleries that had never considered their voices worth amplifying. Local high schools were integrating creative programs we had funded into their curricula, ensuring that future generations of overlooked artists would have opportunities I had been forced to create for myself. "You were incredible tonight," David said, his pride evident in his voice. "But you know what impressed me most? How you talked about your family without any bitterness. 3 years ago, you were so angry you could barely function, and now you talk about that experience like it was a gift." He was right. Although the transformation hadn't been immediate or easy, the anger that had sustained me through that first year of boundary setting had gradually evolved into something more powerful: understanding. I now recognized that my parents' treatment of me had been shaped by their own limitations and fears, rather than any deficiency in my worth. Vanessa's self-centeredness was a product of never learning that other people's needs mattered. Jordan's obliviousness was the natural result of never being forced to consider perspectives outside his own experience. This understanding didn't excuse their behavior or eliminate its impact, but it had freed me from the exhausting work of holding on to resentment. The energy I had once spent nursing old wounds was now directed toward preventing new ones, helping other overlooked voices find their platforms before decades of invisibility convinced them they didn't deserve recognition.
My phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah Chen, one of our first scholarship recipients who was now working as a successful freelance illustrator in Los Angeles. "Saw your speech online. You're changing lives out here, too. My portfolio is booking months ahead thanks to the confidence I learned from your program." Messages like Sarah's arrived regularly now, updates from young artists who had transformed recognition into sustainable careers. The ripple effects extended far beyond individual success stories. Art directors were actively seeking diverse talent for commercial projects. Gallery owners were expanding their criteria for emerging artist exhibitions. Design firms were implementing inclusive hiring practices that prioritized creativity over connections. The systemic change I had hoped to create was actually happening, but it had required years of patient advocacy and strategic relationship building. Unlike the dramatic confrontations that had characterized my family dynamics, professional change happened through consistent demonstration of value rather than emotional appeals for recognition. My relationship with my parents had settled into a pattern that would have been unimaginable 3 years earlier. We had dinner together once a month, conversations that operated under completely different rules than our previous interactions. They asked about my work with genuine interest, remembered details from previous conversations, and treated my achievements as worthy of celebration rather than polite acknowledgement. The shift had been gradual but unmistakable, beginning 6 months after the birthday party incident when Vanessa's marriage began unraveling in spectacular fashion. Her financial demands had escalated beyond what my parents could accommodate, leading to accusations of favoritism that were so divorced from reality they bordered on delusional. For the first time in their lives, my parents experienced being on the receiving end of Vanessa's manipulation and found it bewildering. "We never realized how much we took your independence for granted," my mother had admitted during one of our restructured dinners. "Vanessa expects us to solve every problem, but you've always just handled things yourself. We thought that meant you didn't need support, but maybe it meant that you had given up expecting it from us." The insight had been both validating and painful. My self-sufficiency, born from years of necessity, had been interpreted as a lack of need rather than an abundance of strength. My parents had never considered that my overlooked daughter might have developed capabilities that their favored children lacked precisely because she had been forced to navigate challenges without assistance. Jordan's evolution had been even more dramatic. The brother who had once dismissed my concerns about family favoritism had become an active ally in recognizing and addressing patterns of dysfunction. His growing awareness had led him to decline several offers of financial support from our parents, insisting that he wanted to build independence rather than dependence. I keep thinking about all the times I accepted help without question while you were handling everything alone. It's embarrassing how long it took me to see what was happening.
His recognition mattered more than I had expected. Having a family member acknowledge the reality I had experienced for decades felt like finally being seen after a lifetime of invisibility. Jordan's support didn't erase the years of being overlooked, but it demonstrated that growth and change were possible, even within entrenched family systems. Vanessa herself remained largely absent from our family interactions, her marriage having ended in divorce that she blamed on everyone except herself. Her financial struggles had deepened rather than resolved, leading to a pattern of crisis and drama that my parents were no longer willing to enable. The golden child who had once commanded automatic support now found herself facing consequences that felt foreign and unfair to someone who had never been held accountable for poor decisions.
During one of my monthly dinners with my parents, my father had shared an interaction with Vanessa that perfectly illustrated her unchanged perspective. She had called demanding money for legal fees related to her divorce, becoming furious when they explained they couldn't afford to help. Her response had been to accuse them of punishing her for not being perfect like Rachel. A statement so detached from reality, it would have been funny if it weren't so revealing. She said you were always the favorite because you never needed help, my father had recounted with obvious bewilderment. I didn't know how to explain that needing help and receiving it are two different things. The conversation had marked a turning point in my parents' understanding of their own behavior. They were finally recognizing that my independence hadn't been natural or effortless, but a survival mechanism developed in response to their unavailability. The daughter they had dismissed as undemanding had actually been the most demanding of all, demanding enough strength from herself to compensate for what they hadn't provided. These family revelations might have been satisfying if they had arrived decades earlier, but at 35, I found them more interesting than healing. The validation was welcome, but my sense of worth no longer depended on my parents' recognition. I had built a life based on my own values and surrounded myself with people who appreciated my authentic self rather than tolerating my presence. David and I had recently purchased a larger home with space for the family we were planning to start. The house hunting process had been an exercise in intentional choice-making, selecting a neighborhood where creativity was valued and children were treated as individuals rather than extensions of their parents' ambitions. We had visited schools that emphasize collaboration over competition, spoken with neighbors who seemed genuinely interested in community building rather than status displays. I want our kids to know their worth isn't conditional, I had told David as we toured potential neighborhoods. They should never have to choose between being authentic and being loved. The pregnancy test sitting in our bathroom drawer had been positive for 3 days, a secret David and I were savoring before sharing with the wider world. The timing felt perfect. Our careers were stable, our relationship was stronger than ever, and most importantly, we had both done the emotional work necessary to break generational patterns of favoritism and neglect. Planning for parenthood had forced us to examine our own childhoods with clinical precision. David's family, while healthier than mine, had their own subtle dynamics that needed conscious attention. His parents' tendency to solve problems through financial assistance rather than emotional support had created different but related issues around independence and self-reliance. We need to love them enough to let them struggle, David had observed during one of our conversations about parenting philosophy, not with basic needs or safety, but with the kind of challenges that build resilience and confidence. The insight reflected everything I had learned about growth and recognition. Children needed enough support to feel secure, but enough challenge to develop capabilities. They needed celebration that was specific and earned rather than generic and automatic. Most importantly, they needed to know that their worth was inherent rather than performance-based. My speaking engagements had evolved beyond arts advocacy to include presentations about family dynamics and personal growth. The response had been overwhelming. Audiences hungry for permission to examine their own relationships and set boundaries that protected their well-being.
The birthday party story had become a touchstone for people questioning whether they were accepting treatment they didn't deserve. Your story gave me courage to tell my mother that she couldn't criticize my parenting choices, one woman had shared after a presentation in Denver. I realized I had been seeking approval from someone who was never going to give it freely. Comments like these arrived daily through social media and email, creating an unexpected community of people who had decided to stop accepting less than they deserved. The network extended far beyond artists and creative professionals to include anyone who had felt invisible in their own families or professional environments. The most rewarding aspect of this expanded platform was watching people transform their own pain into purpose. A teacher in Seattle had started a program supporting students from dysfunctional families. A business executive in Miami had implemented mentorship initiatives for overlooked employees. A social worker in Portland had developed workshops helping adults set healthy boundaries with toxic family members.
Each person who found strength in my story and used it to help others created ripple effects I could never have imagined when I first walked into that birthday party 3 years ago. The personal devastation that had felt like the end of everything had actually been the beginning of work that was changing lives across the country. The Creative Voices program had expanded beyond Arizona to include partnerships with organizations in 12 states. Next month, I would be speaking at a national conference about systemic change in arts education, sharing strategies that were being implemented in communities where overlooked talent had never been given platforms for recognition. The professional success felt surreal sometimes, remembering the woman who had once apologized for taking up space in meetings. That woman had believed recognition was something other people bestowed, not something she could create for herself and others. She had measured her worth by external validation rather than internal conviction. The transformation hadn't been magical or instant. It had required years of consistent choice-making, boundary setting, and values clarification. Some days had been setbacks, filled with old patterns of self-doubt and approval-seeking. But each challenge had been an opportunity to practice new responses, to choose authenticity over accommodation, to prioritize respect over peace. As I write this, November 15th is approaching again, the anniversary that has become more important to me than my actual birthday. David and I mark it each year with a quiet dinner and reflection on how much our lives have changed since that pivotal evening. This year feels especially significant, knowing that we're carrying new life that will be raised with intentional love rather than conditional approval. The cake may have read, "Congratulations, sis," but the real congratulations belonged to me, for finally understanding my worth, for refusing to accept treatment that diminished my value, and for transforming personal pain into powerful advocacy for others who felt invisible. Family, I've learned, is created through consistent love and mutual respect rather than inherited through blood relations. The family I've built includes David, our close friends, the scholarship recipients I mentor, the colleagues who support my vision, and even the healthier relationships I've developed with Jordan and my parents. Sometimes the most devastating moments contain the seeds of the most meaningful transformations. Sometimes being overlooked teaches you to see others with extraordinary clarity. Sometimes having your celebrations stolen motivates you to create better celebrations for people who desperately need them. Walking into that party and discovering it wasn't mine led me to build a life that finally, authentically, completely is mine. The recognition I had sought from others became recognition I created for myself and shared with anyone brave enough to demand better than they had been offered. That's the message I carry into every speech, every scholarship decision, every conversation with young artists who remind me of my former self. Your worth is not dependent on other people's ability to see it. Your voice matters whether or not anyone is listening. Your dreams deserve pursuit regardless of who believes in them. The birthday party that broke my heart ultimately saved my life, forcing me to choose between remaining invisible and finally, powerfully, stepping into the light. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.